So, thank you for joining me on the Dan Hipkiss podcast. I'm here with Jenny Tong, Olympic weightlifter and coach and business magnate and all of that. So yeah, let's get into it. I think the first thing is what's your, front page of Wikipedia? Who's Jenny Tong? Because it's hopefully quite a broad range of people will be watching or listening.
Yeah, I feel like Jenny Tong in herself is a broad range of people. I have so many different, I wouldn't call them personalities, but just, facets of who I am as an individual. So I guess if you were to Google search me, Wikipedia, it would probably come up. I don't think I've got Wikipedia, but just weightlifter. But I am much more than just my sport. And so I think if you Googled me, you would find weightlifter. But hopefully in this podcast we'll talk a little bit more about who I actually am. Yeah,
the woman behind the weightlifter.
Absolutely.
So I've been fortunate enough to know Jenny for I think like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, about 6 years now, yeah.
Yeah, so how did you start weightlifting?
So I hadn't done sport since I was a child basically, and moved up to Sheffield for university after having done some performing arts in London during college, and I kind of wanted to try a bit of sport. I'd realised that the puppy fat wasn't leaving. I was carrying a little bit of body fat, and I hated cardio. I hated going on the CV kit. So when I came up to uni, I thought, well, I really want to try a sport, something that gets me active and also enables me to find a community of like-minded individuals. But I just thought, instead of coming to university and focusing on partying, which I'd done plenty of, I want to come to university and experience something new. So I was looking on the sports fair list at university, and I was actually looking for wrestling because I'd done judo for a few years as a kid, and down in the W's there was no wrestling, but there was weightlifting.
It's the next best thing, isn't it?
Well, it just kind of caught my eye, and I'd been going to the gym and just doing some free weight stuff for a few months, and I thought, well, it's this free session, I might as well try it. And I went along to a free taster session, and they haven't been able to get rid of me since.
No, and now you're pretty much running those taster sessions, running the coaching.
Yeah.
It's a pretty mad journey, all from lifting weights.
I'm just going into that one session, yeah. So I'm now the assistant head coach for Hallam Barbell, and I look after all the lifters and the community aspect of it, and do some coach development within the club. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really interesting to see. We were chatting before we started that a few of us used to go to Spoons and eat loads of food and not train that hard, but also secretly train really hard.
Yeah.
No one really looked like they were doing much, but everyone would be worked after a session. Obviously now I've coached the world's strongest man, Paul Smith, who we used to train with, has competed at World's Strongest Man, and you represented the country, coached God knows how many people, beginners up to high level athletes, and it's just mad that
it's been such a quick turnaround as well. I still can't believe that we were just we were like a band of hooligans, just coming in and out of the gym, back to Spoons, we'd go back to mine and chill, eat more food.
Yep.
It was, and 6 years ago we were completely different people, and to see where we all are now just goes to show, when you commit yourself to something, you commit yourself to learning and to exploring a different avenue, you don't know where you're going to end up.
Oh,
and,
no.
My coaching now, it's not just limited to the club. I'm a coach of British weightlifting, I'm a regional pathway coach, and I coach the England youth squad as well. And so that's bizarre to me. A lot of those kids are nearly the same age that I was when I started, and they're already on this really high standard pathway, and I'm looking at them this is weird. Obviously it's a great honour to be your coach, but at the same time, I would have never thought this was where I would be.
Yeah,
when I was your age.
I just think that, like, from my personal experience, I sort of knew we were doing something pretty awesome, but I had no idea what it was. And it could have just been eating at spoons and just lifting weights, like it was good fun, but there's sort of a feeling of something's going to happen.
We were all pretty committed.
Yeah.
We didn't really know what we were committed to, but we were turning up and we were grafting.
Yeah, it was some horrific sessions of barely being able to walk to spoons.
Yeah.
Yeah, just training really hard, but sort of enjoying the process. And I think it's really cool to see you're now not giving the same experience to other people, because it's not how you train. But, you know, you're helping people on the same pathway. And yeah, that level, like with the youth squad and stuff, it's just so cool to see the potential that's coming up as well.
Some incredible athletes in the UK at the minute. The youth lifters at the moment are flying, and you wouldn't think, given COVID and given the last 18 months, but they are moving so well, and it's so impressive to see the way the landscape has changed within women's strength sports since I started. Has been incredible, and it's been a real honour to be part of that generation, or the start of this movement, where now I think the British weightlifting membership is something like 48, 52. It did swing the other way a couple of years ago in favour of women, but the membership is, there's so many more female lifters. The standards for women are incredible. Like, we've got 4 women going to the Olympics.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Which I don't actually think has ever happened in the UK for weightlifting.
I can't think of...
In one Olympic Games.
And they're all ridiculously good lifters.
Yeah,
it's not like they've gone...
competitive. You've got to be. This new ranking system is brutal. And so that's just... It's been so incredible to be part of, and it's a real honour to be able to coach this next generation, in the next generation of Emily Godleys and Emily Campbells and your Sarahs and your Zoes.
Yeah,
it's just brilliant. Yeah,
it's just a really good time for British sport in general, but the women's side seems to be flourishing.
Definitely.
So, obviously now, strength sports for women is more accessible. It's not totally the norm. There's a lot of Instagram pages that point out a lot of issues in the social media side of women training especially, but how did you feel starting weightlifting as a 18-year-old?
Yeah, I was just about to turn 19. I mean, I always say this, I'm not going to lie and say that I went in just thinking I want to get strong and jacked, because I didn't. I wanted to get strong, and I didn't want to get too bulky. And that is a genuine truth that I hold to this day. There is still an element in my head where I'm like, I don't really want to take creatine because I am happy with how my body is. And that's really conflicting as an athlete, even at this point. But early on, I just remember thinking, I want to get strong and I want to turn up.
Yeah.
I realised that that's not going to happen doing donkey kicks or whatever you call them, like on the floor with your glute bands, because also I just found that so uninteresting. I actually really enjoyed the feeling of lifting weights, and that was what drew me in. The physical aspect of it was almost secondary, but I think in terms of accessibility, it is very terrifying. As I was saying before we started, I'm like the most extroverted introvert, or introverted extrovert, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah.
Because for about 3 months, I had to psych myself up to go into the free weights area before I dare go in there. And then once I was in there and knew what I was doing, I was just like tunnel vision, focusing on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But that first step was terrifying. So I do really think that, obviously we've made loads of progress, but even still online, there's so much misinformation out there. There's so many con artists out there who try and sell you a pipe dream. And so it does still very much seem like a bit of a minefield for people who don't have access to individuals to give them support and guidance in that right way and information basically, because the internet is rife with crap.
Yeah. So what would you say, to Jenny at 18, 19 who'd wanted to tone up? Like, what path would you recommend to go down? Like, without being too businessy, is there the right way to get into weightlifting for people who want to?
I think there are two ways. You can either get a PT, and that's what I did. What I realised was there was only a limited amount of stuff that I could do confidently, and so I then got a PT, and I just wanted him to show me the ropes, and so I had a basic understanding, and I found that was really helpful. So I would say there are actually 3 avenues: a PT, a class, so where you're amongst a group of people, or just going straight into a club, where it's actually a class is a little bit more, not a fitness class necessarily. I run strength classes. I used to run strength classes specifically that weren't weightlifting or powerlifting.
Yeah.
But I would say those are your 3 avenues: get a PT, go to a strength class, or find a good club, whether that's a weightlifting club or a powerlifting club or a strongman club.
Yeah.
Find a community. Have a peer, even if it's just in your PT, someone that's going to support you and educate you along the way. I think that's probably the best option, because going solo, being a lone wolf, absolutely fine, but you end up building bad habits, you end up not necessarily being safe, and you end up compromising on a lot of good technique that you might be missing out on. So I would always say seek out a professional in your local area and do your research as well.
In my experience, I've found that it's so much easier coaching a total beginner, because you can just tell them the right way to do it. Whereas, I've worked with some pretty high level athletes, and you're just going, what you're doing's wrong, but you've been doing it for 20 years, so it's going to take ages to break that habit. Whereas starting out the right way, again with big quote marks and all that, you can sort of build the good habits you want.
It's easy to identify poor movement patterns with beginners as well.
Yeah.
And they are a lot more receptive to hearing about it, because they want to be better at the thing they're paying to do.
Yeah.
So whenever I do the first PT session with someone, or the first one-to-one, I tend to go through some basic tests to see where the movement patterns kind of mess up, or what imbalances they might have. And I always find we spend the first half an hour going, right, go to the bar, do a technical drill, go over to the mat, do some adjustments, and then back and forth, so that they understand that this is a process. You are not going to walk in here and be the best athlete in the world. You are going to walk in here as yourself, and you're going to leave 2% better.
Yeah.
And that is every day, that's what's going to happen. So we identify the problem, we fix it. We identify the problem, and it's a process. And if you do that early on, then there are no egos. There's no, I'm going to be the next Sarah Davies. You can think that in your mind, but you realise and you begin to respect the fact that lifting weights is hard.
Yeah, and people who are in that position where you might be looking up to them or wanting to be better than them, if you go through the process sort of properly, you realise that they're not just good, they've worked.
You've got to work hard, yeah. But this is the thing as well, and we talk about strength training. I always end up referring to weightlifting, because that's my sport, that's my community. But strength training is so broad that I really do believe that there is a place for everyone in ways that I don't necessarily see with other sports or other forms of exercise. I find strength training is incredibly inclusive, in that it doesn't really matter what your ability is, it doesn't really matter what your base level strength is. There is a place for you on the spectrum, along the sports, along the disciplines, along the recreational side of it. So that's one of the things I think that's drawn me to the weightlifting community in general, because I know that I can help people, not just through Olympic weightlifting, but to just be stronger and happier and better versions of themselves, and to give themselves better life prospects later on in life.
Yeah.
Very basic things that, I don't know, I couldn't necessarily do being a judo coach.
Yeah, there is there's sort of a weird, I think, in society, it's hard to phrase it, but the place where women are told to fit in, spend a lot of time sort of in this box. When we were running like beginner strongman sessions, we'd get couples turn up, and you could tell like that couple's got like 3 months. Like if she keeps weight training, they're going to break up, because you could see, rep like set one, they'd like give up and look at their partner, and then you'd be like, look, it's just it's a thing, like you can pick it up, like you're capable of it. And you see them do it, and you see them just stand up a little bit taller and just sort of go,
growing confidence.
Yeah, and they just sort of begin to know themselves as an entity rather than as a thing that has to fit into what their partner or parents might say is normal for them to do. And yeah, not necessarily strength training, but some form of structured sport, I think for anyone is amazing. But you see women in sport and the development of following athletes where they put posts up and they're like, I was running like 10 miles a day, I was really skinny, I was like really unhappy. And so then I found this sport and now I love everything, I don't speak to these people anymore, life's really good.
Yeah.
So what was your upbringing like around sport? Because you said you did, was it judo beforehand?
Yeah.
So how did you...
So I grew up in a tiny little rural village in the middle of Spain. The buses were like every 2 to 3 hours, if they ever actually arrived. So there wasn't really that much sport available. The school was quite good in that they used to send us, they like signed the school up to a like teams competition.
Yeah.
So they'd, like after school trips, they'd send everyone like once every 2 weeks and do tournaments against other schools, and every semester would be a different sport. So that was really great. Like I loved sports growing up. I was so competitive. I was such a tomboy. My favourite teacher in school was the PE teacher, because that was the only thing I tried really hard in.
Yeah.
And he had a bit of a soft spot for me. I remember once we did the equivalent of like the UK bleep test.
Yeah.
But I don't even know if this was a real test or if he just wanted to have an hour to himself. He just set us off running around the football pitch and was like, just run until you drop. And there was not a cat's chance in hell I was going to stop until everyone else had stopped.
Just went and got a book out, just, you lot go run.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what he did. But no, so I always loved sports growing up. And, what was once a really nourishing environment for me as a child, being in this beautiful village in southern Spain, as I got older, became a little bit problematic. And so I started getting into trouble quite early on, and that's when Mum realised, like, right, we need to get her a hobby. So I started doing judo. They literally started up, it was one of the first in-school clubs that we had, and I managed to persuade 2 of my friends to come along because, again, the most introverted extrovert ever, I didn't actually want to go on my own. And they came along and we stuck at it, and I don't know how long they ended up doing it for, but I did it for about 6 years, I think, 6 or 7 years, on and off. And then in that time I also did BMX, so BMX racing.
Yeah.
Wasn't brave enough to do the freestyle. And I loved that, just, little powerhouse, big thunder thighs, just used to spin my bike. And then I just did that typical teenage thing of not being interested in sports and being more interested in going out on the lash, but very early on, like way too young. And so I grew up very quickly. I basically ended up being a complete mess. I had drug and drink problems. and it got so bad that my school kicked me out.
Nice.
I caught me doing drugs in the toilets for like the second or third time.
There's
and
weird
like,
parallels with our upbringing.
and they were like, we just can't do this anymore. But because I lived in such a small area, it was the only school.
Yeah.
And so my mum was forced then to ship me back to the UK to live with my dad. And eventually, like, I moved back, finished my GCSEs, and moved down to London. And then while I was in London, I was at the Brit School of Performing Arts and did a bit of prancing around on stages for a couple of years. That was great. You know, living in London was a real learning experience for me. I had some quite major life events happen during that time as well.
Were you living, I'd say by yourself, but without parents down there?
Yeah, so I was literally in a flat on my own.
Yeah.
In Croydon, big up
Nice.
Croydon. So yeah, I grew up pretty quickly, and then after college moved up to Sheffield, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah, it's nuts. I just sort of remembering like you turning up for the first weightlifting session. Was it AO5 or was it?
It was Pearson. Hallam Pearson building, yeah.
And I'd been training with Paul a bit by then, and you know we were super committed to something already, and then this group of students turned up, and we're like, oh god, like this is going to be loud. Like me and Paul, like we'll train in, like we used to train in another building at Hallam, like we'd put classical on, we'd be like nice and mellow, like raging at ourselves, but like super quiet. And then like Jenny appeared. Well,
like
the quiet,
big spiky hair.
Yeah, just massive hair and just there. Like there was no option.
Yeah.
I think maybe 10 minutes of just quietly lifting in a corner, and we'd sort of, can't remember, I just have this vivid memory of, I think you were snatching and you just kept failing, and you'd like dump it behind you and you'd get really annoyed, and I think Greg was maybe running the session, and it'd be like, why don't you take some weight off the bar, and you're like, no, I'm here. Like 20 reps later, you stuck it, like walked it out across the whole gym. It's just like, she's gonna stay. Like she's coming back.
Yeah.
Sorry, my chair's just had a little explosion. But you say like you're this introverted extrovert. Do you think? Because like if you turn up somewhere, like everyone knows like Jenny's here. Do you think that's just how you are, maybe if you're a bit uncomfortable with stuff, or is it just how you are, you know, if you're vibing off somewhere?
I would love to know. I feel like I've tried pretending like not to exist in a space, and like I try and make myself smaller, and people still seem to see me. And you know, like when I'm talking to someone, like, I'm quite animated, and then I'll realise someone's looking at me, and so I go into myself and I get really embarrassed. And actually, one of the things that I've realised over the past couple of years, like I've done a lot of self-evaluation really, because I realise now that that's not a me problem. That's a them problem, because I'm actually incredibly comfortable in my own skin, and in my own presence, and I think just as not even in a big-headed way, but just as a presence, like when I've got my hair down, it's just like this big blonde thing, and my stupid accent, and you know it just echoes through a room, and so I would never go into a room and intentionally make myself known unless I'm amongst friends and being a bit of a twat.
Yeah.
But people still seem to know I'm there.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
And I've really struggled with that for a while, because I was just constantly trying to be someone else, trying to fit in, trying to make myself smaller and more palatable. But then I realised like if people aren't gonna like me, they're not gonna like me, whether I make myself smaller or I'm just myself. And one of the things that, you know, with the club, I was able to be myself. I was able to be frustrated with lifts. I was able to be stupid and gregarious because it was a really welcoming environment and I didn't feel like I had to be anyone other than myself. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the community aspect of, like, there are so many different communities within strength sports. I really felt like I had a supporting, nourishing community of like-minded people that, you know, enabled me to explore who I was at university, like, you know, like you'd hope you get to do.
Yeah,
but
not without, but sort of as a parallel to the way people normally explore themselves at uni, which is quad in court in Sheffield.
Vodka Red Bulls. Yeah, no, I really wasn't interested in Jägermeister shots, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was really, really good for me to have just a group of people accept me for me, and, you know, that's paved the way essentially for me becoming who I am, and I'm very grateful for the life that I have. And it resonates a lot with me that Helen Barbell was such a crucial part of that, because without that I wouldn't have had the vehicles or the pathways to doing most of the things that I'm doing now.
Do you ever sort of think, you know, what if you know, it stopped at the letter before W? You know, like, what if there wasn't...
Well, I was going to do rugby.
Yeah.
I did maybe a month or two of rugby, and the training was really, it was fine, but it was really difficult to do alongside weightlifting. It did get to a point where I had to choose between rugby and weightlifting. And I just remember, going back to the community thing, I remember being on a night out which I felt like I had to go to because of the nature of the rugby environment. I felt like I had to go out because otherwise I was being left out, or otherwise they'd think that I was no fun, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, like...
And I remember being on a night out and asking the woman, they were getting shots, and I said to the woman, I was like, can you just fill mine with water? Because I had training in the morning. We had Helen Barbell and I didn't want to be hungover for training. And it was at that point I realised that actually I cared much more about weightlifting than I did about rugby.
Yeah, because I turned up training in some bad states.
Yeah, it's not good, is it?
No, it's really terrible.
It's
like,
really crap.
Once you sort of like, I can just about get through this. But I can't remember what comp we'd been to, but I was coaching Paul, and the comp went well, and we went out. Like, we went out. We were like 4 a.m. sat by the cathedral.
Nice.
Like, we are out.
Very nice.
And then we went for food the next day, and someone we know, like, walked past where we were eating, and then 4 beers appeared at the table, and there was only 2 of us, and we're like, oh man, we've got to train, and I already feel pretty terrible. So we had like a couple of pints and got to the gym, and I was just like, nah, I'm gonna just lie on the floor for a bit. So now I'm stretching.
There's been a few where I'm like, you should know better by now.
Oh, we all should know better. But I mean, we do know better, but we're just making informed decisions.
Do as I say, not as I do.
It's just an informed decision, isn't it? So, do you think, like, uni time, you were going into sport? Like, there was no option of going back to partying, going back to... No?
No, I mentally, I'd already committed to doing sport of some sort. I wanted to be fit, I wanted to be healthy. I honestly, like, I forget, because I was so young, it does very much just seem like the life that I led was that of a different person, and it was so unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I was so unhappy, and it was such a dark place where I really didn't believe that I had a future in front of me, that when I got out of that, I realised that all I wanted was to be healthy and to be happy, and I was going to pursue something that would give me not purpose and meaning and all that wishy-washy crap, but it would give me direction that wasn't just limited to this thing that I'm studying, because, you know, I had big plans to go into diplomacy, but as with everything in my life, I don't want to be identified as just this one thing. I don't want to have just this one facet of my life, because I see what that does to people, and people are miserable.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, no offence to any 9-to-5ers out there who love their jobs, because I'm very, very glad that you do. But there are so many people out there who have 9-to-5 jobs or non-9-to-5 jobs that are just miserable because that's all they've got.
Yeah.
That's all they have, week in, week out. They don't have hobbies. They don't have time to go and spend with their friends. They don't have time to spend with their families. And I just always knew that I wanted more than that. And if I was going to study this really hard subject, then I also want to make sure that I have something alongside it that is going to keep me fit, keep me healthy. I want to look like Jada Pinkett Smith when I'm older.
No, that's fair.
So, you know, that's always been one of my only goals, is to age like she has, like a fine wine. So, you know, you've got to make that happen. Just eating Ben and Jerry's every night and going out on the lash, it's not how it's going to work.
It's the harder way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, you know, talking about a bit about when you were like younger and partying, and when did that stop? Because obviously you say you went to the Brit Academy, moved to London by yourself. That seems like prime time to party like that.
So it got a bit better by then. Yeah, essentially, it makes me sound awful, but it mostly stopped when I was about 15. It had gotten really bad. I was thinking about it earlier actually. I had a growth on my nose from shoving so much crap up there. And like, I was 14 when I had that, and like, I can't believe that now. If I'd seen a 14-year-old with that, I'd think, are you okay? Do you need me to call the social? Like, I can't. That just seems like a whole other lifetime ago. And then I moved back to the UK, and I kept having run-ins with police over drugs and partying, and so I got a bit better, but I still wasn't quite over the line, if you know what I mean. And then at 16 I moved down to London, and I realised there were certain things that I was just not going to be able to get away with doing in London. So I did what most people would have done, and I got a fake ID.
Nice. Smart.
So I was still going like to some epic, I say epic, like big illegal raves, like that kind of stuff. But for the most part, I was like just behaving myself in the nightclubs, like with my pretty dress on, like you know, that kind of stuff. So I was still partying, and you know, I worked in Central, and my team were fantastic. They were just such a great laugh, and we used to go out quite a lot. So yeah, I was still partying, but there were levels to it where I had a certain amount of responsibility that I didn't have before. I had to go off college, I had shows, I had work, I had bills to pay, you know, so
you've got to.
There were boundaries that and then by the time I came to uni, like, love Chef, but no offence, it's not South of Spain and it's not London.
It's really not
It's
South of Spain.
really not. And so I was actually thinking with Sheffield, I thought, I can settle here, I can calm down, and just take my foot off the gas, because I wasn't going to find the same kind of parties, and that was actually quite a good thing.
Yeah, you came to uni to sort of chill
mellow out, yeah, which is so bizarre, but yeah, I did. I basically came to mellow out. It got to a head a little bit. So while I was living in London, my mum sadly passed away from a brain tumour, and that was just after my 18th birthday. Yeah, it would have been just after my 18th birthday. And that period, there was about a period of 2 to 3 months where I just went a little bit off the rails. Yeah,
which is, if you've already been off the rails, it's like
and it
the way to go back to.
It wasn't too far. It wasn't too far.
Yeah, you could still see the rails.
I could still pay my rent, you know, and that's how I measure things. Can you pay? Could you pay your rent? Yes. Okay, we're good then. But I was like, it got to a point, not started getting popular at the time.
Yeah.
And I would just lay there, like, on my daybed, looking up at the skylight, doing NOS from, like, 9 till midnight.
Yeah.
Like, as in, like, 9 in the morning until midnight.
A long shift.
Just on my own, like, completely debilitated. I didn't want to get up, I didn't want to go out, I didn't want to be with my friends. And when I did, I just wanted to be drinking and partying and splashing money up the walls. And at the time, I didn't really realise that was too much of a problem until one day I was doing that, and I just I literally had an epiphany moment. And looking up at out my skylight, thinking, you can't do this anymore. You need to stop this, because it genuinely got to a point, and I always thought people were joking. I was forgetting things. Like I could feel myself rotting my brain and starving my brain of oxygen through this nitrous oxide. And I was starting to feel the effects it was having. And I really wanted to go to uni and be a smart person and do really great things in life. And so I just had that epiphany moment. I was like, okay, we stop now. And I still like to party. I still like to let my fur out. But it's all measured. I do think, when you're an athlete, life can be so strict and controlled, and everything is about discipline, that you forget how to have fun. And I don't want that for myself. Like I said before, being an athlete Jenny isn't just an athlete, Jenny is Jenny.
Yeah, so. And you got into this to have fun and be happy, so getting rid of that.
It would take away the pleasure of why you do it.
Yeah, the epiphany thing's really weird, because when I was sort of smoking heroin sort of as a hobby, I remember we had like a mad week. I just remember this absolutely mad week where someone got some, like, I think it was DMT or something like that, and then some weird herbal stuff that, it's this guy said shaman use it to, like, see the future. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll have some of that.
Sure.
Taking, like, diazepam every night, waking up taking loads of speed because you've got to balance it out. And I remember we stole a car. Well, there was what we assumed was an abandoned car because it had been there for ages. So we called a dodgy scrapyard we know. So, like, stole a car, but for like 60 quid, whatever the scrap value was. And then I remember getting some heroin, and then there was a cafe near the flat we were all crashing in, and they used to chuck food out every night. And I remember getting chased by the police because we'd, like, broke in their yard to get in the bins. And I was just like, I need to get my shit together. Like, that's it. But, like, for ages I've been like, no, everything's good, like, playing in a band, like, life's really cool. But then, like, there's just that one moment where you just go, oh no, this is bad. Like, this needs to change. And I think a lot of people seem to have, it's been logical to sort themselves out, but until that moment comes, it's just not going to stick.
No, you can't see it. And also, it's really hard to. Like, sometimes you don't know how, and it took me moving countries, moving cities, finding a whole new version of myself in order to do that.
Yeah.
It's not easy. I think it can sound so preachy, and I hate it. I sometimes don't like or don't feel comfortable telling my story because people are always like, oh, like, how have you managed to get where you are and do all these things? It's like, we are completely different people. I've had to do some quite radical things in my life that from the outside you probably can't see.
Yeah.
But that I wouldn't wish on you, or I don't know what your situation necessarily is, so how things played out for me in terms of coming out the other side, that's not necessarily how it's going to be for you, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I think it's so complex, people are so complex, the human psyche is so complex, that you get to situations like this where people are in difficult situations and you can tell them, you can hold the mirror up to their face, but if they're choosing to close their eyes, until they decide to open them and really see what's happening, you might as well be arguing with a brick wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you could go back to 14-year-old Jenny and say everything, you know, whatever you want to say, but like realistically, 14-year-old Jenny had, like you were saying, a growth in your nose from whatever was going up there. So on some level you must have known it's probably not alright. But until you have that moment where you decide what needs to change, that just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's so easy for people just to say, I'll just quit, or just do this. Like, why don't you just do this? So, well, might not be that easy. But the trippy thing is, like, when you really make that decision to do it, it feels really easy. Like, it might be a hard process, but it's...
Yeah, it's, I don't like lying to myself, and so I will never do something half-heartedly. You know, like, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to do something, I'll promise myself I'll do it, and I will do it.
Yeah.
If I don't really want to do it, I'll give it a go.
Yeah, and it'll never happen.
And we'll see what happens. Like, get it acid on. I'm not too bothered. But if I really want it, I will do it. And it's so important to understand yourself as a person.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just don't actually understand themselves and how they function. Like, you know, when you, I don't know, have an argument with your partner, but the argument is actually something so petty just because you got triggered by this one little thing, and you can't for the life of you understand why you're so triggered. But about 15 minutes later you sit back and go, I just overreacted then. I just made a scene for no reason. Those kind of things, people don't understand why they do them. And like I mentioned earlier, I've spent many years now looking at myself intrinsically and understanding what makes me tick, what makes me the way I am, and using that to apply it to the circumstances I find myself in, week in, week out. You know, every year something new comes along where I have to change and I will react in a certain way. And in order for that to be positive and progressive, I need to understand what it means. Because a lot of people will just, something will happen to them and they'll get triggered by it. And it'll be like, you know, how some people will have a very minor life event that will send them west.
Yeah.
And it's because they don't really understand themselves or their life or their position. They just exist in this kind of like chasm, and there's just this space that is their life, but they've never actually sat and evaluated what that means or who the people around them are and how they support them, what their support system is, and suddenly become very shocked, or shocked into submission, shocked into action. Whereas I think, going back to the main point of pulling yourself out of that hole, if you understand yourself as a person, you understand what makes you tick, what your addiction is. Because I don't have addictions, I have an addictive personality.
Yeah, preach.
So it doesn't matter what that specific... I might be addicted to these the protein cream fudge brownies for the next...
Always a plug.
Always a plug for the next few months. But yes, it's because they're delicious, but also I have an incredibly addictive personality, which means that it doesn't even matter if I didn't like something. I'm probably going... If it nourishes me or gives me a tingly feeling somewhere, I'm probably gonna get drawn to it. And that, whether that's, you know, delicious fudge or whether that's something really bad for me, I understand myself and I understand what's going to happen if I don't limit it or if I don't act with caution. And a lot of people just haven't done that self-exploration. I sound like such a hippie. I'm not really, although, did I ever told you I was a Buddhist growing up?
No. See, this is what this is about. This is... So Buddhist Jenny.
So Buddhist Jenny, yeah.
I'm really into reading like Thai Buddhist stuff.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a really interesting way of viewing the world that we're in, and like little things like if I'm eating an orange, one piece, eat one piece, don't think about other things. When that's done, eat the next one. Like, don't be forcing stuff in, like doing the washing up, and just enjoying the process of doing it. And just like these really, I suppose, typical across all aspects of Buddhism, but you know, just that presence of being and existing in a world, because
there's so much going on.
Yeah, and it's really helped me realise that we're all pretty temporary, and you know, the vessel that you're in is super temporary. Like, that is, I don't know, 80 years, like, if you're lucky. Like, who knows, but that vessel is not long. But if you can look after what's inside, then it's got to be a good thing.
Then you're on the path to at least making those 80 years a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, so sorry, I just went on a little Buddhist tangent.
Right.
Yeah, what?
Buddhism.
Yeah.
So, as you grew up in Catholic Spain, and my mum and dad, in theory, were both Christians.
Yeah.
Not very practicing, although my dad would tell you otherwise. And so living in Catholic Spain, I just remember from very early on, obviously you know me and my views on certain things with regards to, you know, traditions.
Yeah.
I'm not a traditionalist, but I remember very early on looking around my peers and thinking, this is really backwards. Why does she stay home all day? Why is she just cleaning your house, please? Like, this makes no sense to me. And it was all rooted in religion, and that I remember being told the story of Adam and Eve, and I was like, hang on, what? Like, why is everything Eve's fault? Why was she made out of a man? And like, I couldn't.
You can't argue with facts, Jen.
No.
You can't argue with the truth.
Well, you know, men are the ones with the Adam's apple, so someone's lying about who actually bit into that apple, okay? But no, I remember being really conflicted very early on and not quite understanding religion. And also I just thought the lessons were really boring. I was like, you're wanting to tell me about this mythical man in the sky, about this white man in the desert in Israel with blue eyes. None of this really makes any sense to me. I don't want to do this. And, you know, on a parallel, at the same time, my mum basically, I was a lot growing up. I was a full diva. She just wanted to be able to get rid of me for the weekend. And basically, somehow or another, it came about that there was a Buddhist centre up in the mountains, and my nanny had quite taken a fancy to one of the guys who worked there. It's a perfect plan. Right, Jenny doesn't want to study religion, Jenny doesn't want to do all the things that her friends do on a weekend, which is like, there's a thing called catechesis, which is basically 2 hours of sitting in a room smaller than this office around a table reading the Bible. Like, but it's Bible studies. It's just Bible studies.
Get Jenny in the mountains.
I was just, get Jenny in the mountains. Please don't send Jenny to Bible studies. And so I, for about 2, maybe 3 years, used to go up every other weekend to the Buddhist camp.
Nice.
And we used to take gifts of food to the Buddha. We used to pray every morning. We used to go on long walks and meditate.
Yeah, it's the weird thing is, like, to me, Buddhism makes so much sense. Like, if you're gonna follow a religion, this bloke said just chill out and don't be a dick.
Yeah, and I think that's it. So I can still very much identify with Buddhism, because I'm like, everyone just needs to calm the frickety-frick down, examine your environment, take a breath, appreciate what you've got. Done. Stop being a twat. Be nice to people.
If you do this, the angry man in the sky.
The angry man in the sky will
smite you.
Yeah.
Like, what's all the smiting about?
Also, another thing was I, for some reason, always believed in reincarnation.
Yeah.
And my teachers did not like that. The
No.
religious school teachers just did not like that. And I was like, no, I'm convinced I was a bunny in past life. You can't tell me that I was either up there or down there.
Well, you just weren't. You just weren't.
I just weren't. Like you're not telling me that I was anything other than a bunny.
Like you were nothing, and then the magic man decided it was time for you to exist.
Yeah, like the stalk.
Yeah, just dropped you off.
Suddenly I was like, the light.
But yeah, Buddhism sounds a bit either really dark or really mental. Like if you just generally talking to Buddhists about it, you sort of go, chatting to people I know who are sort of more into it. It's like, oh, what about this? And it's like, oh, it doesn't matter, we're all going to die. I'm like, alright.
There's a little bit of existentialism, but it's a truth, right?
Yeah.
And we only have a limited amount of time on this earth, and I won't be silenced, I won't be censored, I won't have anyone else dictate how I'm going to spend my life, because the time that I have is limited. And why on earth would I want to spend a single moment of it being unhappy because of anything other than what I've done to myself or built for myself? I think time is infinite but finite at the same time. Our time is finite.
Yeah, time itself
isn't finite.
Yeah, like it's gonna, whatever you do doesn't really matter in like the grand scheme of things. Like we are such a small blip, like as we are now, such a small period that people get so angry about stuff.
Just history. You think about what's happened in the past, we'll call it since the Industrial Revolution. That's what we think about when we think about history. But I'm reading a book at the moment called Humankind, and to give like a visual representation of humans in their current form, they laid out like a calendar of the year, and the point where Neanderthals came into existence in history, in the span of history, is at 23:59.58 hours.
Yeah.
Of the 31st of December.
Yeah, like we are.
This is like a tiny little blip, just the tiniest little blip in history.
Yeah.
And we believe the world revolves around us. And I think this is the one thing that still resonates me with Buddhism, is that there is so much out there that is, in essence, irrelevant to you. Like, you have to value your own existence because it is just this tiny little thing, this unimportant thing. Don't let it ruin you by just being constantly miserable at the things that you don't have, because it doesn't matter. You're not going to have it anyway. You might as well just be grateful for where you're at.
What you have and you're unhappy with, someone else would be buzzing. Like, you just take stock of what you've actually got. And, through working with charities in the past, you speak to people who think society, like, oh, these down and out, they've got nothing, they're this. But you speak to them, they're like, you had a really nice cup of tea this morning. Like, it's really good. Like, if you could just view, you're driving to your dream job in a sports car and this, and you're like, oh, petrol's 10p more expensive, and you're going to be down about it. Like,
you'll let it ruin your day.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we're, like, humans have changed so much as well, though. I think that I saw a thing earlier that for 4,000 years, the horse was the quickest way of moving. And then I think it was 60 years we got a car. No, I think it was 100 years from a car to a plane to being on the moon. And then people go, I feel a bit overwhelmed. It's like, you should feel overwhelmed. Because this is overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, we take the mick out of old people who struggle with, like, the new technologies and things like that. And my heart really goes out to them, because I can't keep up.
Yeah.
I Excel beats me. I have like books on how to use Excel, and like
our generation invented the stuff we're recording this on, and it's like
still confusing.
Yeah, when I realised I could plug a camera in like to power and I didn't need batteries, I was like, this is magic. Like, this is incredible. Like, do other people know about this?
All
it's
the
like
time.
I'm 30. Technology sometimes just makes me feel like I'm 90 years old.
Technology is amazing. Technology really is amazing. All I need now is some technology to fix me.
just
physically fix me.
I thought you meant in like a deep.
Well, no, I think we're getting into a little bit QAnon there. Like, I've not had the Bill Gates chip in me yet. Probably by the time this goes out, I'll have had.
I'll be roboted up.
Bill Gates will know where I am.
But yeah, it's just nuts. Like, to think that. I mean, we've come together through just picking stuff up. Like, literally just picking stuff up, putting it down where we picked it up from. Like, at least in strongman, you pick it up and put it down, like, over there.
Move it somewhere.
Like, we just pick it up and put it down, and from that, like, I've seen you, it sounds like I'm really old, but, like, I've seen you develop from, like, someone who, like, for 10 minutes was really shy.
Yeah.
And then just super loud, super out there. And then there's been glimmers of like, Jenny alright? And it's like, well, she must just be feeling a bit off.
Yeah.
But like, we're all training, so, when we trained stupidly hard. So everyone would be off now and again. But then you look back and, like, through chatting to people, what I want to do with this podcast is understand that the times when we thought, you might just be a bit tired, you might have actually felt a bit shit.
Yeah.
Like, people don't feel great all the time, regardless of what they project. Like, life's a lot for people sometimes, and it's just, it's been really cool to see you develop into whatever this is now.
I'm not even sure what this is.
But with like the technology stuff and being a female strength athlete, being an elite athlete almost separately from that, which is an unfortunate thing that I think social media makes have to happen. Like, you're a female weightlifter and that's one box, but you're an elite athlete, whereas it should just be you're an elite athlete. But how have you sort of coped with, you are an elite athlete, sponsored, you're sponsored by some amazing companies and you're out there a lot. Like, how have you felt being forced to be out there? I mean, obviously you totally love it, keep giving you free stuff and money and loads of posts, but...
No, I mean, the being out there. In fact, I said to Rooney about midway through 2019, I was like, I really need to be better on Instagram. I really need to like push Instagram as a platform a little bit more, because I was just so tunnel visioned into just training. Like, I wake up, do my uni work, go to training, go to work. That was my whole life, and I was starting to see the potential in possibly being able to monetize my Instagram in some way. But prior to that, I don't think necessarily I didn't really feel like I was putting myself out there. I was just being, and I was just being present and saying yes to things and going to events and doing, being involved in British weightlifting AGMs and things like that. And what I quickly found was that I think I was a bit of a consistent or a constant. There were certain events I was there, certain meetings I was there, and so I became a face that you recognise within the sport. which then, even before I was at a particularly high standard, people would recognise me within the sport as being someone who's within, like, in the community.
Yeah, and your name's sort of in the Rolodex already. Like,
yeah.
If they need someone, well, Jenny's been at every one of these, so
yeah,
she might be up for this.
She might help coach you, or, you know, whether it's at like I say, an AGM, for instance, and then giving feedback for how I think the organisation could run better for its members, and just things like that. And then I pushed my Instagram a little bit more, and I've done quite well on that. But I've actually found that I've found so much. I sound like such a hippie. I've found so much inner peace. I found so much inner peace that I don't really have to. I really hope none of my sponsors are watching. I don't really have to try that hard on social media.
Yeah.
In that, I'm just my true self, and if people want to be there, fantastic. Like, I love that people are coming on this journey with me. But if they don't want to be there, that's absolutely fine by me.
The journey's happening.
The journey's happening. I'm still going to be myself. I'm still going to protect my own energy. I'm still going to love myself unconditionally, because there is not a single other person on this earth who is going to be me, love me, pay my bills, do any of those things. So I'm not going to lose sleep over them.
Yeah.
And actually, becoming in that sense has been the best thing that could have happened to me. We were talking earlier about how as a 53 lifter back in the day,
yeah,
my anxiety, it was just, my head was a mess. I was a fantastic athlete, worked incredibly hard, really strict with my nutrition, to the point where I ended up with crazy depression because I had no life.
Yeah.
Really bad anxiety, which I'd never experienced before. I'd had depression growing up when I was on antidepressants as a kid, but like anxiety, I'd never experienced that before. I had complete body dysmorphia. What I saw in the mirror wasn't who I was. And it's like serious confidence issues where I didn't understand my own body. I was obsessing about my weight. You know, I had really quite bad eating disorders. And it had gotten to a point where I didn't really know who I was in my own body, in my own presence, in my own life, other than just this weightlifting machine.
Yeah.
And then over the past few years, you know, I moved up a weight class, and I just committed to being happy.
Yeah, and the weight you are is what you'll compete at.
Is what I compete at, is what I exist at, is what is a natural weight for me. I might not be as competitive, but that's an L I'm willing to take for my mental health.
Yeah.
And for my well-being. And I am, you know, I'm incredibly happy with my life. Maybe not quite my lifting at the moment because of my injury, but
it'll get fixed.
That will get fixed, and things will be fine, and the sun will keep shining, the world will keep spinning, and I'm now able to live life on my own terms, where I am happy in my own skin, I'm happy in my own environment. I don't really struggle with anxiety, I don't struggle with depression, and it's because I've done so much self-acceptance, even on this platform that is Instagram. Like, I remember being in college and following influencers and just thinking, I'm never going to look like these people. I'm never going to look like these people. I don't understand how they're monetizing this. This is a wild concept to me. And I remember feeling so isolated by that. I would have never, ever, ever, ever believed that however many years down the line I would then be that person.
Yeah.
And I get quite upset sometimes when people like kind of make references about how I look compared to how they look, because I've not always looked like this, and I've not always been as comfortable in my own skin. And this is going to sound like really extra, but this is literally the prime of my life. There's probably not going to be another time in my life where I will look physically as fit as I do now. Maybe if I'm lucky in a few years, But the reality is this is like the prime steak. Right now,
This is it.
I am prime 24-year aged steak.
I'm hoping there's like room for a 35-year-old peak.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But so there is no value in comparing where I'm at to where someone else is at, and for them to compare themselves to me, because comparison, the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And I am now in a place where I can be happy in my own existence, because I'm not looking at other people going, I wish I was as strong as them, or I wish I looked like them. I spent so many years wishing I was white, wishing I had like long blonde flowing hair. I'm not. It's never going to happen. I have these big thunder thighs that are really good at making me jump really high and lift weights, and they are a blessing, and I'm so grateful to them. And so learning how to exist in my own body, in the space that I'm in this crazy world of social media, has actually more than anything been empowering. It's been a fantastic opportunity. I don't think I will live my life like this forever, and so this is such a fun and exciting period in my life where if I just sat there worrying about what other people were thinking or what other people are doing, would you ever really enjoy anything?
Yeah, I think where you are now is exactly where you are, so you need to enjoy that. You said about obviously wishing you were white, wishing you had blonde hair. How do you feel? Do you feel there's any limits as not necessarily a woman of colour, but as a person of colour going into strength sports? Do you feel like there's barriers in place, or is that your sort of personal journey that you've had to?
When I started, if you'd have asked me that, I would have said yes, because I really didn't see anyone that looked like me. Yeah. I remember seeing Zoe on the side of a bus. Zoe, for anyone that doesn't know weightlifting, Zoe Smith is an Olympic weightlifter, a phenomenal weightlifter, and someone who I am very proud to call my friend. Before I ever even considered doing weightlifting, way back in 2012, I saw Zoe on the side of a bus. I was like, who is this brown girl lifting weights? Like, what? Girls, first of all, you're telling me girls lift weights, and then you're telling me that brown girls lift weights. That is a wild concept to me. Whereas now, there are, some incredibly talented young black and brown girls and Asian girls, absolutely shredding it up within strength sports. I do always think that there is room for more, and that there should be room for more, and that representation matters across all spectrums. I don't think that's something that we should kind of rest on our laurels with, because unfortunately what you tend to find is that it all goes back to communities, and the people who tend to get involved in non-traditional sports tend to be non-traditionalists within their communities.
Yeah.
But then, just from a health and well-being perspective, you're not permeating those communities and getting them active. So I think representation matters in a way that is sometimes targeted at getting into Caribbean communities, or at getting into, your Nigerian and your Ghanaian communities. And I think that there are better ways that we could do that, because strength sports is such a broad spectrum. You don't have to, when you think of someone lifting weights, you need to break down that stereotype of it just being a jacked up strong woman.
Yeah.
Lifting weights can be literally lifting dumbbells in your community centre.
Yeah.
And you're still going to give yourself a better quality of life by doing so. So I do think that it's gotten a lot better over the years, but I don't think you can ever have too much representation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And sort of from the slightly selfish, coachy fan point of view, the more people lifting, the more people doing awesome things, the more money in the sport, the more exposure, the more chance of like winning gold medals. You know, it doesn't matter. On one level, it doesn't matter what colour someone is. Like, you put a Team GB singlet on, or, you know, wherever your country is, you put a singlet on and you step out on stage. You're representing that country, and you should be adored as someone who has committed their life to representing the country. And, you know, gender, colour, background, just, in my mind, singlet on, that's it.
But it's about having the opportunity. It's about making sure those opportunities exist for people to find those things.
Yeah.
And sometimes what will be the problem is that there aren't opportunities for people to even realise that that is a thing.
Yeah, like you said, like women lifting weights, brown girls lifting weights. Like,
would I have ever actually gone out and sought out a weightlifting, like an Olympic weightlifting club? No. If it hadn't have been by happenstance of like going down this list and finding Olympic weightlifting, I would have never gone and found the sport of weightlifting.
Yeah.
I'd have just been doing basic gym booty stuff in the gym for the next however many years.
Yeah.
I definitely I don't know, in retrospect, where I would have found strength training, and that's why I have so much admiration and respect for every single person who walked through the doors of a taster session.
Yeah.
The courage that it takes to sign up to something that you've never tried before, with people you've never met before, not knowing if you're going to be any good at it, and just going and giving it a go. Like, I doff my hat to every single person.
100%. I mean, there was a time when me and Paul Smith were doing the taster sessions, and there's like 320 kilos of human stood there, like, between me and Paul, trying to do flips, trying to do handstands, doing whatever we want, like waiting for people to turn up. And then after a while we realised, like, people can see us. Like, the people doing the taste, like, they're waiting through that door, which is open. Like, they can see what's going on, and you just think, these people stuck around, and like some of them are still weightlifting, like still going through it, and you're like fair play. Because I think if I'd have turned up and seen like me and Paul that we'd just finished training and there'd be like blood on us, or like chalk or tacky, and it's like people like just going straight into that environment and then realising that strength training's ace, and you get to have fun and try
and
stupid.
The frustration is worth it.
Yeah, like it's really worth it. But like stupid box jumps, like some of the stuff we'd set up in like Pearson, like me and Paul trying to vector jump over a broom handle that we snapped in half, and just landing on it, like just pushing it.
Don't want to know where that landed.
I just stood on it. There's no. But we just like kept pushing stuff, and we're like, in the grand scheme of things, it was totally pointless. But I was with my mates. We had some loud music on, and we'd
nourishing environment.
Yeah, and we didn't care. Like, Paul was pressing like 180 kilos overhead. There were people in there who were looking forward to moving up to a 20 kilo bar.
Oh. It didn't matter.
No, I've seen people like jerk 40 kilos, and I've seen people jerk like 200 kilos. And the psyche is the same.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter who you are or what level you're at. It's really good fun.
And that's the thing, that's kind of what I love about strength sports, is that it's so individual. Everyone's on their own journey, but everyone is so supportive. I say everyone, I speak for the people who I mix with. There are dickheads in any sport.
Yeah.
But, the community as a whole, across all disciplines and all spectrums, there is a common theme and a common feeling of you don't judge someone else by your own standards, because everyone's grafting.
Yeah.
And you know that whatever they are doing over there, that's bloody excellent, because they're trying really hard. They've turned up. They're pushing themselves. You know, we're not all born to lift weights. We're not all born.
No, but you can
specimens.
You can try hard.
But we can try hard, and you can support someone in that process.
Yeah, I've been in gyms pulling people up who are like 400 kilo deadlifters, and if they're just not trying hard, I'll be like, "What are you doing?" You see someone deadlifting like their first time pulling 5 plates, and they are trying, and that's it. Like, that's where the psych is. It doesn't matter what's on the bar. If you're giving it 100%, you will have the respect of everyone around you. I think that feels like a good way to end it.
I agree.
Is there anything you want to add? Anyone you want to thank? Like sponsory stuff and.
I won't shout out my sponsors, not for any other reason than I'm playing footsies on the table.
Professional, just
you
cold.
You can find all my sponsors on my Instagram, which I'm sure Dan will tag somewhere. But for anyone that follows me on Instagram, I just want to say a big thank you to you. Thank you for coming along on my journey and for being there, for supporting me. It means a lot, even though I don't always shout about it. Every single person who is there on my Instagram, you know, from my followers to my sponsors, I am so eternally grateful for the support and for the backing and the belief and just the pure good vibes that you all bring. So thank you. And if you want to see some more of those good vibes and you don't follow me, you know what to do.
Yep. Jenny's Instagram and stuff will be in the video description below, and in the description on my Instagram. As always, thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, do all the YouTubey stuff. And that's it. Cheers, guys.